In today's episode, Daniel and I play floor plan detectives during listener Q&A.
And later, you'll meet Gina Bellous. Gina is restoring a very cute little Victorian cottage in Southern California.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
This is True Tales from Old Houses, episode 92. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Stacy. How you doing?
Oh, good. We had a ton of fun the last episode. At least I did, I hope.
I'm glad to hear you say we, because I had a blast.
I think the feedback has been really good about having you on board. And for me, it's a joy because I have somebody else to talk to, which I really like. Podcasting is kind of a little lonely sometimes, a lonely profession, or it can be.
Sure. I mean, blogging to all of these things. And you have to play so many different roles. I want to be clear, Stacy is still doing all the hard stuff. I just show up and chat.
Well, speaking of doing the hard stuff, as the producer/host, I made a very big omission for our first episode together. And I feel really badly about that. You know, it was our first time together and I was just getting over vertigo and we had spent a weekend helping Brad with stuff at Silver Lake and it just got a little chaotic. And I feel terrible that I forgot to thank our sponsors at the beginning of the show. So I want to say thank you to them now, retroactively thank them for the first episode. And our season 9 sponsors, we are so lucky to have the Craftsman Store, Sutherland Wells, Preservan, and Abatron. And I don't think, or maybe I don't make it clear, but this show, you know, in the beginning, it was all out of my pocket, but now, this show could not continue without our sponsors, and I'm so grateful to them.
They're such good sponsors, like just perfect for the show we're doing.
Right. I agree. Same. Before we get started, too, I do have an announcement to make, and I talked a lot about this last season, and I guess I'm still talking about it, but I am hosting a tour with the airfare included to Quebec City, Montreal, and the Canadian Maritimes. And that trip is August 10th through 20th. We're going to go to Prince Edward Island. Also, if you're an Anne of Green Gables fan, I know this sort of predates your activity here on the blog, Daniel, but I've been hosting these tours. Last year, we went to Scotland and Northern Ireland. And there's actually kind of a lot of historical overlap with this part of Canada that we're visiting, and also Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Canada. So if you wanted to visit, not you personally, Daniel, of course, you're always welcome. But if anybody...
I really do.
If anyone has wanted to visit Scotland and Ireland, but it's just not in the cards right now, this trip, I think, would be an excellent substitute. You know, sometimes you have like small kids and you think, oh, I can travel, but I can't go that far away. So, you know, Canada's not that far away.
It's not. I can drive there. You can really drive there. You're right there.
I'm right there. In fact, there's a little part of Buffalo where if I had a throwing arm worth anything, I could probably throw a rock over into Canada. But alas, it would land right in the river. But we're going to see all sorts of things on this trip. We're going to see old buildings, Cape Breton Highlands National Park, speaking of Scotland, Highlands, all that sort of thing. And I get to continue my obsession with Halifax and how it was shaped with the Halifax explosion. So just to wrap this up, a $200 deposit does hold your spot, and the full payment is due by May 27th. I think the actual reservation date is by April 30th. But remember, the airfare is included. So this trip is a little more expensive than you might see a trip somewhere else, but the airfare is included, a lot of meals. I think we get like 13 meals, which is quite a lot for a tour like this. And we also, I think last year, they at least gave us one alcoholic beverage per dinner. I'm not much of a drinker anymore, but I was then, so I enjoyed my...
I'll take yours.
You'll take it. Okay.
Mom, I didn't just say that.
Right.
Crush yours.
All right. So with that announcement out of the way, I just have one more thing to say, and that is that we got a really fun message. I love getting messages. I wish we'd get more. I wish people would contact us all the time with stuff that they hear on the show and they think, oh, this reminds me of something else. And because we like a good tangent.
We really, especially me. It's pretty much all I do, tangents.
Well, this message comes from Rosemary, and she was listening to the final episode of season 8, which again predates you, Daniel. One of these days, we'll start circulating through all the content that you've been a part of. But I talked to Chris and Linda from History Attic Research, and they were talking about myths busted. People come to them and they want to know things about their house. And a lot of them think, oh yeah, my house was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And then Chris and Linda say, well, the research does not support that. Yeah. And the other big myth was that George Washington stayed at their house. I don't know why that one tickles me, but it does. It makes me kind of laugh.
We have so many houses here that George Washington, I'm like, did this guy sleep in a different place every night? Because sort of
was he ever at home? If he slept in all those places, did he ever go home?
Mount Vernon's very pretty.
Rosemary wrote in to tell us, or to tell everyone really, that there's a play called George Washington Slept Here that's actually a humorous play. And it was written on that exact concept where a gentleman buys a house, thinking that he can either sell it, fix it up and sell it because George Washington slept there, sell it for more money. It's supposed to be really funny. There is a movie. It came out in 1942. I didn't watch it, but I was like, wow, that is just ripe for a remake as far as I'm concerned. And I did look, I searched the Google and couldn't see anywhere that play was actually being done. But I think it would be hysterical. I think that'd be great. It'd probably a good high school play, actually, if anybody's thinking about looking for something new that's not Grease or Arsenic and Old Lace or all the other ones that circulate.
Or you and I could just read it radio style.
We could.
Practice our dialects.
I am not opposed to this idea. Let's keep talking about this.
Honestly, Patreon, baby.
Exactly. All right. Well, those were the two announcements that I had. But Rosemary, thank you so much for writing in and telling us about that.
That's so fun to know. If anyone ever wants to comment or tell us something or anything, please use the contact form at True Tales from Old Houses or leave us a voicemail. We'd love to hear your beautiful dulcet tones.
We do. All right. Well, yeah, that is all the announcements I have. So what do you have going on?
Oh my, Stacy, let me tell you. I've been in grout purgatory. I finally finished scraping out grout joints on a tiny hex tile floor that I put in and was very sloppy about my thin set work and really learned to regret that. So it took me about 6 days to prep and I finally grouted the floor and I'm really glad that's behind me.
I once did a tile floor, not as small tiles as you did, but I did the same thing where all that thin set squeezes up between the tiles and it's really hard to get out. And I think I left mine sitting, this was an old, different house, not Blake Hill House, but a house I worked on, the last one. And I think it sat there for like 3 months because I was like, I don't even want to touch this. And then finally I got into the project. And yes, it was just as horrible as I thought it was going to be. But then when it was over and the grout was in, it actually looked really nice.
Yeah, I knew it would be horrible. I severely miscalculated like how horrible. So definitely while you're tiling, just try to keep those grout lines as clear as possible and save yourself some heartache on the back end.
Yeah, for sure.
Whoa, I just went right into advice.
You did. I like it. Yeah, I absolutely like it. No, that's fine. You asked me what I was up to. I'm actually going back to Utah tomorrow. I'm going to go visit Andy in Utah, and I have an interview to do out there with historic Murray. And Murray is a town that's probably 15 minutes from Salt Lake City. And I'm going to meet Amy and one other person. I'll get back to you because of course that'll be on a future episode. I'll be doing that interview by myself, unfortunately. And I will miss you. I'll
miss you too. Someday we'll go out together. I have an aunt and uncle and 2 cousins out in Salt Lake. So.
Oh yeah, we should do it.
I'll also introduce all of you so you can be friends.
Oh, that would be good. I have this dream of getting an RV sponsorship and having this RV, letting us drive across the country and visiting a lot of these people that have been on the show before and seeing new places. And I think you would be excellent. You'd be an excellent companion on the journey.
I love a road trip, and I haven't been on one in 15 years. I can't believe I reached the age where I'm talking about 15 years and I was an adult then.
Oh, you know what? I just heard this morning, 15 years, try 50. The Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon, came out 50 years ago today, this day that we're recording.
Oh, yeah. My word.
I know, 50 years.
When I was in high school, my brother left for college and I just sort of like took over his bedroom because he had the record player in it. And I listened to that album a lot. I don't
Did
know
you?
what
Did
was
you like
wrong
it?
with me. Oh, yeah. And then I tried to do the thing where it tracks to The Wizard of Oz. If you ever heard of this.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like everyone who has like been to college has heard of this. Yeah, it's really interesting I assume if you're on substances. We don't have to talk about that.
You would have to be augmented in some way to
Right.
to put those two together. But yeah, anyway, 50 years. You're talking about 15, but 50 years.
That's wild. Last week I saw this old man with the raddest jean jacket that had that album cover like cross-stitched on the back. Like it was really elaborate.
Wow. Cross-stitched.
Yeah, he was like buying cigarettes at the gas station, so I didn't want to talk about it. But it's like,
Yeah.
that's quite a body of work you have literally on your back.
Yeah, it is an iconic image. You immediately can see it from far away. And, oh, it's Pink Floyd. It's Pink Floyd. Yeah. Yeah. Andy loves Pink
years.
Floyd.
Oh, my
I
word.
I know.
Somehow that makes me feel old, and I wasn't even a thought when that came out.
Well, it actually kind of makes me feel a little bit younger because I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't listen to Dark Side of the Moon because I was way too young.
Okay.
I was busy being sheltered by my parents at that time. Pink Floyd was not allowed in our house.
Yeah, they were just over me at that point. So like, do whatever.
Yeah, you were youngest. That happens with that youngest child, right?
Yeah. Well, my sister is technically 1 minute younger than me. So I very much took on the role of like the middle child, even though.
You're 1 minute difference. I always forget you're a twin.
Yeah. I have a twin sister.
We could probably keep going, but we need to take a break.
Okay.
So we do. So after the break, listener Q&A is up next. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by the Craftsman Store, another excellent resource from our friend Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Craftsman Store is your go-to place for old house tools and supplies.
So once again, longtime friend of the pod, Scott, has taken the hassle out of tracking down all those specialized old house supplies we need and put them all in one place for us. It's a cozy little online hardware store full of books, tools, replacement parts, and more.
Yeah, and he has lots of things, but I find myself sort of gravitating towards the window restoration supplies, and especially things like diamond glazing points, because I have a very hard time finding them anywhere else.
It shocks me not at all that that's the part of the website you really like.
Well, I am consistent, if nothing else. Scott runs a top-notch small business. The customer service is an actual human, and they ship just as fast as any other online retailer.
So from window restoration to plaster repair, they have everything you need to do the job like a pro.
Check it out today at thecraftsmanstore.com and save 10% on your order if you use our code TrueTales. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Preservan, a unique preservation franchise opportunity developed by longtime window restoration pro Ty McBride. The mission of Preservan is to save the future by preserving the past.
So that sounds great, but what exactly is Preservan, Stacy?
Well, what if you could go to work every day on your own terms while also doing something meaningful within your community? What if you could start a home service business without owning complicated and expensive tools that are difficult to transport to and from job sites?
Loving all of it. Yes, I'm with you.
Well, the team at Preservan will train and support you to operate a Preservan business in your community, equipping you with the tools you need to perform sustainable wood rot repairs and build your own team of epoxy techs.
Okay, how does that part work?
You will receive the playbook for a proven preservation business, exclusive access to Ever-Resin epoxy products, business software, and all of the marketing, advertising, training, and technical support you need. Owning a Preservan franchise offers the perfect opportunity for work-life balance while serving your neighbors and community in a recession-proof industry.
So you'll get to work your own hours and spend the rest of your time in ways that are important to you. So to learn more about becoming a part of the Preservan family and their mission, go to preservanfranchise.com/truetales. That is PRESERVAN. preservanfranchise.com/truetales.
Listener Q&A. It is time for listener Q&A, Daniel.
Fun. Today's question comes from Eliza. Thank you, Eliza. She asks, how do I figure out my original floor plan? So much is gone.
All right. Well, I'm going to be relying heavily on you for this one today, Daniel, because...
Oh, no, that was my strategy too, Stacy.
Oops. Okay.
We're going to do it.
We have nothing to say. Yeah. I think we'll have to take a quick break again then.
Figure it out, Eliza.
Yeah.
No, we have some tips. I'm sure we have something.
We do. And the reason I don't have a whole lot of help is because all the houses that I've lived in, including this one, Blake Hill House, I'm lucky. I'm so lucky that things weren't remodeled and changed a lot. And I know a lot of the houses here, a lot of the big houses in the town where I live have been switched to triplexes or duplexes, or there's lots of multi-family housing. And then people try to take them back to a single family dwelling. And that's where it gets a little confusing. It's like, where were the walls and where were the doors and how did things used to be? So what help can you offer to Eliza today?
I haven't had to do a ton of this in my own house. It was divided into a 2-family, but very sort of lazily. So I think it sort of depends how deep you're going to go, right? Because we all know that these old houses are like layers. They're like an onion. So I think a good place to start is noticing any weird patches in baseboards, and you can kind of tap the walls and you can definitely hear the difference between plaster and drywall. So a lot of times layout changes are old doorways getting removed and covered up. I know you've had a couple of those situations. Yeah.
That's true. As you were talking, I was like, oh, maybe I do have a little bit to contribute here.
We're smarter than we think. So I feel like that's a really good kind of visual clue when you're not tearing things apart necessarily. Floor patches too. So a lot of times like mantles will get removed. This has happened in my house in a few places. And so in those cases, unless they were doing like a really careful job, which usually they weren't at the time that they were making these decisions, you'll see a basically mantle-sized patch in the baseboard, and the molding might not exactly match, or the floor will be patched in where there might have been a hearth. So those are usually good clues. I think another thing is, I feel like Blake Hill House feels like, I don't know why my mouth just did that, but it sounded right.
I like it.
The Blake Hill House. It feels like a very architect home. It's an odd layout. A house like mine is a very classic kind of side hall layout. So another good strategy is if there's other historic homes in your neighborhood, it's possible they were built by the same builder. And it's also possible that it's just going to be a very similar floor plan. So that can be helpful. Should I keep going? I feel like I'm just going.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And it sounds kind of snooty, but I think Blake Hill House would be considered more of a high style house at the time. So there's a chance that if you have a house like that, that maybe the floor plans are even somewhere in the historical records of your house in your historical society. It's, someplace those still might be available. And so, when you get down to sort of more of a vernacular, I love your idea of looking around the neighborhood and seeing houses that might be built the same. That was especially true, mid-century, where you'd have these builders who would build one house on one side and then the exact opposite floor plan, the house next to it. And then they would just sort of alternate all the way through the neighborhood. And we think of those today as, suburbs, and we're like, oh, that's terrible. But it's really not. It can be a really interesting way to find out the original layout of your house.
Totally. And I mean, even like Victorian era or older, I mean, my neighborhood is kind of full of houses that are really not that different than mine. Rooms will be different sizes, but like the duplex that I bought, like it's a similar layout to this house. It just is, it's a different house. So yeah. And then I think as you peel back layers, which maybe you don't have to do, so don't demolish your house just to try to figure stuff out. But if you are, you'll often see stuff in the walls. So framing materials that are definitely newer, and like that stuff's pretty evident when you see it. You'll know. Your inner house person will know.
What you were talking about earlier that I've had this experience too is that I did have a closet that was turned into the bathroom. The terrible bathroom project that I talked about all last season finally finished. And the plaster, it was still plaster, but it was a plastered board. When I started to dig into it, I was like, oh, this isn't lath and plaster.
Lath.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for that term.
I have some of that in my house.
So you could tell that was done after the fact. And it was a doorway. So basically they had covered a doorway that led into a closet, and they closed it off on that side and opened a door on the other in the bedroom, to make sort of an ensuite situation, an early ensuite, but it was probably like a trunk closet or something since this house was built as a summer house. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that you might eventually uncover. But, I guess it just depends. Like, your house tells the story of you, and it tells the story of all the people who've lived there thus far. So, kind of determine why you want to know these things, and are you trying to put them back, or what's important to you? And maybe not everything will go back exactly as it was, because your house, again, it represents a time in history, and houses change over time.
So the room that I'm sitting in is basically the room that always gets turned into a bathroom in houses like mine. And this one never was, because there was an addition put on the back. So unlike a lot of houses, when you get to the top of my stairs, there's a bathroom basically right in front of you. But where additions have not been put on, and the houses were built before plumbing and stuff, this little room, which originally, as far as I know, would have been like a nursery, tends to get turned into a bathroom. And so there's a doorway behind me that leads into my bedroom. And then there's a doorway on the adjacent wall that leads out into the hallway. So the one behind me going into the bedroom always gets closed up, and the one from the hallway stays, and then they plop a bathroom in. So that's a good thing of seeing what other houses are doing around the neighborhood. Like, mine would be a good example of how the original layout was. And
Well, that's really interesting.
Also, weird things with windows is often a good clue. In that example of this room always getting turned into a bathroom, it's the one right above the front door. And a house like mine always has 3 windows across the top, and on the bottom, the front door and 2 windows. That one right above the front door, when they turn it into a bathroom, always shrinks. They make it so tiny. And I don't know why, because it doesn't have to happen, but they always do. And so that's a really good clue too. And just when that balance looks off, it's unlikely that it was originally built that way.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent.
I feel like we covered it to the best of our ability.
Yeah. And Eliza, thank you so much for that excellent question. If anybody else has a question for us to answer on an upcoming episode, just head on over to truetalesfromoldhouses.com and submit it through that contact form. And if your question is too technical for us, then we will try to find a pro to help answer it. But yeah, I like that question. Thanks, Eliza.
Thanks, Eliza. That was fun.
All right, Daniel, we need to take another quick break. You ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Sutherland Wells. All of the Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
So there's a big distinction here. Unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change, making it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
So Daniel, remember when I told you about my friend, the woodworker? He was making a painted cabinet for his daughter?
Yes, my heart is still full hearing about it. It's so sweet.
Well, the cabinet is still happening, but when his daughter saw the wood, she liked it so much unpainted that he's not doing that part anymore. So I'm trying to convince him that Sutherland Wells has great tung oil products for sealing unfinished wood. And there's so many different choices. There's an entire product line for whatever anybody's working on right now. Siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
Absolutely. So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells, that's WELLES, sutherlandwells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TRUETALES. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Abitron, which is now a division of UC Coatings.
Abitron manufactures 2 of my very favorite products on the planet that I can't stop talking about, liquid wood and wood epox. And of course, I'm going to talk about them again. I have used them to repair all sorts of wood rot on windows and doors. I've even sculpted a little foot for the desk in my daughter's room. We found it on the side of the road. The little foot was missing, and I just molded one out of wood epox, and no one's the wiser.
Yeah, it's such an incredibly versatile product. You can use it for so many things, and especially getting those weird compound shapes. It just works so nicely.
Liquid wood and wood epox make permanent, cost-effective repairs wherever you find rotted or damaged wood. Abitron products are super easy to use. The instructions are simple and the results are exceptional. There's no shrinking or sagging, and repairs can be sanded and painted just like wood.
So in addition to wood repair, Abitron now also offers other great products for old homes, specifically for concrete repair, plaster repair, window glazing, and more.
So check out their website at abitron.com or follow them on Instagram at abitron_UC or on Facebook at Abitron, a division of UC Coatings.
And from now until March 24th, Abitron has a special coupon code just for you True Tales from Old Houses listeners. Enter epoxy10 at abitron.com. That's epoxy10 to save 10% on your order at abitron.com.
Our guest today is Gina Bellous. When Gina saw her 1895 Victorian cottage, it was love at first sight.
It needed a lot of work, but where other people might have seen a teardown, Gina saw her dream of owning a bed and breakfast coming true.
Hi, my name is Gina Bellous, and I'm currently restoring a Queen Anne Victorian in the Los Angeles Harbor in San Pedro, California.
Welcome, Gina. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Hi, Gina.
Hello. Nice to see you, Daniel.
You too. I think maybe we should explain. This is our third attempt at recording this interview, so Gina has been a real trooper. And I think we're going to throw in some new questions so that she doesn't have to repeat herself all over again.
Yeah, we've had plenty of time to come up with new content since we've tried this twice already. But yeah, what a mess. What a mess. But yeah, you really have been so nice and patient, and we appreciate it because we're excited to talk to you.
Oh, no, it's been fun getting to know you guys even more, so that's great.
For us as well.
Yes, exactly. So I have been following you on Instagram for a while. I've been also reading your blog, and I guess we should just start at the beginning and find out, how did you end up with this house? Because it's very unusual to find, number one, an old house in Los Angeles, and number two, one that, you can fix up the way you like.
Exactly. Especially living in Los Angeles. Prices here, as many people know, are just skyrocket, outrageous, crazy. And so I've always had a passion for just any old houses, I think I'm an old Victorian. I think I'm an old soul. And I've been here before, and this is not my first rodeo. That's what I think. So ever since I was just really young, I used to build doll houses and make miniatures, and I just built little structures that were basically little Victorian houses. And I never really dreamed that, I always hoped, but I never dreamed that I would actually be restoring like a life-size dollhouse. So that's been really cool. So basically what happened was I started looking into trying to find a property, and everything here was so expensive. So I was looking in upstate New York. I have family from Rochester, New York. My parents were born and raised over there. So I had a cousin kind of helping me find properties up there. They're much cheaper, more affordable. And my mom, who, has since passed, she used to tell me, "Oh, you don't want to move there. Don't go there. It's horrible. You'll hate it. It's freezing." I thought, what am I going to do? So I just zipped onto Zillow and did a little search, in Victorian homes in Los Angeles, and two popped up in San Pedro. So I couldn't really afford anything in the downtown LA area that was just out of my budget. And so two popped up in San Pedro, and one was out of my price range still. And then the Queen sort of came along, and she was a probate sale. And that's a whole, we could just have a whole conversation about that. Purchasing a property through probate.
I want to make sure that we talk about purchasing a property through probate today, because
it's such a wild story.
It is a wild story. And I also think that potential might come up for someone else, especially in these areas where it's hard to find an old house. So I think it could be helpful to someone who's still on their old house finding journey. But anyway, so you found this house, and what was it like when you saw it?
Well, the pictures were looking pretty rough, and I was hoping that they were going to be a little better when I drove up. When I drove up, the first thing I saw was the little weather vane, and it was crooked, but instantly I was so endeared with the home. And it was really hard just to get into the house because it was a probate sale. I don't know how it works in other states, but here in Southern California, they have to be on the market for, I think, minimally 6 months, allowing people to see that it's for sale. They'll accept an offer, but it just stands like that, and they have to keep showing it and inviting people in. And so I couldn't get in for some reason. I think that the probate attorneys that were running it thought they had their buyer. And so I got in through another agent, and he sent over this young kid. And the house was just overridden with feral cats and critters. And as soon as he opened the front door, this cat just came flying down the stairs. The kid, fell on his butt screaming. I couldn't stop laughing because it was just so comical. And he got up and composed himself. And he was like, "This is the worst house I've ever seen," because the inside was just as bad as the outside. It was in pretty rough shape. But I just sat there looking at it. And she wasn't a fancy girl because she was originally built to be like a boarding house rental. But I just looked at this house and I said, oh my gosh, I have to have this house. I have to get this house. It's amazing. And from then on, I just made sure to get a proper agent that specialized in probate sales so that I would have a fighting chance of going into court and bidding against the person who already had an offer in. That's kind of how it works. And here I am almost 5 years later and still not halfway through. I knew she was rough, but she was, you open up these old houses, Daniel,
Oh, I know. And at under 5 years, I feel like you're doing great time-wise. You're basically wrapping up the second floor, right?
Yes.
And then moving on to the first. And I wanted to add, in reading your blog and following you on Instagram, you really approach this house with a very artist sensibility, and it's really delightful to read about. I feel like I'm a little the same way. I think Stacy has some of that too. And, where does that come from?
So I'm an artist, and it was just a natural born talent, I believe. It kind of runs on my dad's side of the family. Came from a family of contractors and builders. My father and my brothers were plastering contractors. And so my dad was always teaching me at a young age how to make molds, how to cast plaster, which is going to come in really handy for this old house. And so it was just a natural thing that kind of snowballed into my love of wanting to just restore anything I see. Like, even I've been working on light fixtures. If you guys have seen my recent posts or my stories, I'm working on about 11 of them right now for upstairs. And yeah, it's been a lot of work, but these old houses will teach you new tricks and new skills. I think the biggest thing an old house teaches you is, well, two things: patience and persistence. If you don't have those, it's probably not for you. In the beginning, because Daniel, you brought up a good point. So it seemed like it went really quickly because I had what I thought was a big budget. And generally, if you have a house, some people will say, well, double your budget. I think with an old house, you're going to go far beyond doubling whatever initial price somebody tells you. Doubling is the beginning. And so I quickly kind of, not that I ran out of, resources, but it just got to a point where these guys were coming in. I was paying them more than I was making a day, and they were doing things that I knew I could do. They were within my skill set, and I could do a better job. Even the wood stripping, and I know, Stacy, you had a lot of experience with that. And I was paying a guy to do this. And initially, I was going to repaint the woodwork because it had been painted. It had 10 layers of paint on it. And it kind of had a falling out with him because he was, what was that word we used? Unreliable?
Unreliable, yes.
Yes, that's a nice way to say it. And so he brought back my woodwork, and I do think he held some of it hostage because there were a few pieces missing, which I had to have remilled. But, you live and you learn. But as I got involved with the wood stripping, I realized just how beautiful that wood was underneath there. And so it all just kind of skyrocketed into this whole huge project that I wasn't anticipating. But I got a price. I asked the guy, how much would you charge to strip these doors and the woodwork around it? And I think he wanted, was it $1,000 per door? And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah. And so I just became very, very, very good at stripping wood. And people often joke on Instagram and they call me the Bob Ross of wood restoration. And I love that, and I'll take it.
It's so beautiful. Your woodwork looks flawless, at least on Instagram. I assume in real life too. But also, the work that the light fixtures that you were talking about, this is not a spray paint job, people. You're in there with an artist brush doing, it's really impressive.
Oh, thank you.
I don't think I have the skills or the patience, so I'm very impressed.
I think you need to try it.
Probably, but look behind me. It's raw plastic. We're a ways away. And I'm 10 years in, so.
Do you like paint stripping?
I do not. I don't know of any person that actually likes it. I've gotten my techniques down fairly well. There's so many different products and tools you can use. I do have infrared strippers. Some are really good. Some don't really work. I've ordered some paint strippers from companies that say, oh, this will take everything off. It doesn't. And so I think it's all a matter of application and patience and just letting that product, because I've got a lot of people will message me and go, this product doesn't work for me like it works for you. And again, every piece of wood is different. So there's some wood that paint does not want to come off. It is on there and it doesn't want to let go. And that takes a little finessing, but just doing the entire upstairs, just the whole upstairs, it just, as I did it more and more, just got easier and easier. I don't hate it, but I certainly don't like it. I love the staining. I love that part because it's, again, very creative. That's where the Bob Ross part comes in because my woodwork is all vertical grain, clear vertical grain Doug fir. So it's all different colors. And so I have to like blend in the colors and match, or I'm blending in a newly milled piece of wood that's a lighter color with the redder colors of the old. And when you come and look at this or you run your hand on it, you would never know that this wood was ever painted. It's pretty amazing what you can learn with patience and persistence.
Gina is stripping her woodwork to stain it, and unfortunately mine was always meant to be painted, so I'm stripping woodwork to repaint it, which feels very frustrating. It's like all this work for something that nobody will ever notice except for me.
No, but see, I would notice because you can tell when a wood has been stripped and it's painted and it's just so smooth and the paint looks so nice as opposed to 10 gloppy layers that you're now adding your part of your history and your story to.
That's my strategy, by the way. I do not have the strength to strip the woodwork in this house. So I do a lot of smoothing things out with sanding and some strategic caulking and stuff. But I think some of it might be like I lived in New York City for several years, and there, I mean, the landlord paint jobs are the sloppiest thing on earth. So I think I sort of became more okay with imperfections in my paint jobs. That's what I tell myself.
Yeah, and in an old house, that is part of the character. And originally, I was planning to repaint my woodwork. You know, the guy that had started to strip it, and then he put our new type of primer on it, which was a nightmare to get off. It was, those are not meant to be stripped. But I wasn't planning on that. I was going to repaint the woodwork myself. But when I saw how beautiful the wood was underneath and that it was originally stained and shellacked, I just felt like I wanted to go back to that. And I'm a huge fan of painted woodwork. Don't paint your woodwork. I'm not saying paint your woodwork. But if you have old woodwork that's been painted, go with it. There's some gorgeous colors you can paint it. And sometimes I get a little envious when I see people and they've got these beautiful, deep jewel tone greens or blues with their wallpaper. It's just stunning. And I'm like, I can't do that. I stripped my woodwork. I cannot go back there.
Right. And probably most of our listeners know, but in case this is new information, even old houses, some of them have woodwork that was meant to be painted. So I just want to make that clear. Like it was painted from the get-go. So where we draw the line is like when people are going into these beautiful craftsmen and like, oh, we need to change this all to gray and white, which is what we see so frequently. And not just craftsmen, but you know what I'm saying? Craftsmen typically have these beautiful, rich woodwork, sometimes walnut, oak. Just makes me ill.
I just wanted to sorry, this might not be interesting, but just going back for a sec, it's crazy how prices on these things vary when you try to hire them out. Not to make you regret any of your decisions, but my boyfriend actually lives in Rochester. And so he's working on a house that's sort of nearby, and he's having doors not only stripped, like dip stripped, but also like fully refinished for $75 a door. I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's a great point, Daniel, because it really does depend where you live. Because even for this like $1,000, this man, what he was going to do, because trust me, I thought about it. I toyed with it and thought, gosh, I don't have to deal with this. But he was basically just going to spray a stain on, but it was going to be more like a glaze. So it was going to cover all of that beautiful grain that I worked so hard to bring back. And I said, yeah, no, I don't want a glazed woodwork. You know, that's like painting. You might as well just paint it. And so you're right. To find somebody that can do work here in the state of California, at least down here in Southern California. So the dipping thing is illegal here. And I know like with doors, it can be kind of questionable because it will sometimes it'll ooze out afterwards and start messing with the paint if you do paint. But yeah, everything here apparently causes cancer and everything's illegal. And
we've noticed from all the packaging.
I don't know how it happens here. Nobody else is going to get cancer from it. Only in California.
Well, I want to say too that I believe it's also illegal in New York, but it is not illegal in Pennsylvania. So maybe those doors are crossing the border into Pennsylvania and getting done. We'll go with that. So on one hand, Gina, you could have been our neighbor, which would have been wonderful. And you could have had all this work done cheaply. But on the other hand, you would have been freezing cold while you were here. So,
well, I think I could have gotten a jacket. And I'm still always looking. Like, I would love to find another property. I've got some of my Instagram friends keeping their eyes open for properties that I could potentially turn into a bed and breakfast, because the prices, like I said, here, I'm lucky I'm here because I haven't moved. If I moved here, I would never be able to come back. I mean, the prices are it's just crazy, but I can't believe what you can get in Pennsylvania or upstate New York. It just blows my mind what you can get for even like $100,000. It's like, what?
Yeah.
The tricky part is, even fully restored, the house might not be worth more than $200,000. So it's hard to get in and out of these properties for under 100.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask, speaking of things that feel kind of specific to California, and I saw on one of the earlier posts on your blog, you had a little fight with the building department because they told you to even touch your windows. You had to like replace your windows, right?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I went in there, and I'm Italian, so I can be a little loud. I'm very kind but if you push the wrong button. And so I walked into building and safety. I just got in the house, just closed, was really excited about getting the windows restored. And it was a younger gentleman, and I don't think he quite understood what my house was. So he was telling me that the minute I touch the windows, that they have to all, be raised up. Egress had to be a certain height, because mine, the older houses,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The windows, the bottom of the sills are like really low, barely to my knees. I go almost to they're pretty low. And as a matter of fact, because as a sidebar, the lady that grew up in my house in what years was it? The 60s. She said she fell out of the window.
Oh, no.
When she was like a toddler. And I was like, and she lived to tell about it. And so I can understand their concern. But as soon as I got in there and I just started going nuts on the guy. What do you mean? You're telling me I have to get new windows? This is a historic house. You don't understand. I went nuts on him, and then I left, and I immediately contacted our historical preservation chapter. I'm not sure what it's called. Like, it's in downtown LA. And she said, oh, Gina, the first mistake you made was going in there and doing that. You can restore your windows. It's fine. You can take them out and fix them and put them back. She goes, but if that ever happens again with anything historical, we have something here called the California Historic Building Code. And so there's like letters that can be written where you can write this code in, and to preserve things that would not meet our stringent codes that we have here. You'll see a lot of the older homes have balconies that are really, really low. And mine originally, I think it was maybe 24 inches tall, because the upstairs, it is a full 2 stories, but on the outside, it's not. The walls are very short on the outside. And I did bring that up to code only because I do plan to hopefully open a bed and breakfast, and I don't want people falling over the balcony and suing me or taking my house or whatever. So that was a change where the balcony had been missing for like 30 years or something. And it was just when I found the pieces, it wasn't going to be to code. Could I have done it? Yes. But it just seemed wiser in that respect to build that to code.
Right. And I want to say that California is lucky to have you, because if anybody else had bought that house, they probably would have torn it down and built something taller in its place so they could see the water view, because that is so common in California. What happens with those little lots and those old houses, they would have seen it as a tear down. So what did you see? You didn't see a tear down, and probably Daniel or I wouldn't see a tear down. But what did you see with all the holes in the floorboards and the smell of cats and everything in that house?
Oh, you're bringing back all those memories. Well, again, so I think most of us, or I would say all of us in the old house community, we do have that mantra of there is no such thing as a teardown. And this one, it's interesting because when I first took possession of it and was kind of cleaning it out, and contractors are driving by like crazy, of course, they're maybe hoping to get a job, or they just want to see what's going on. And they would stop and talk, and they're like, we're having a bet, are you guys tearing it down? I'm like, tearing it down? No, and while I was waiting for the probate sale to go through, and that ended up being 6 months, which was supposed to be 15 days, but that's that story we haven't gotten to. There were transients, because the house had been vacant for almost 4 years before I took possession of it. And there was vagrants and transients that kind of moved into the yard. They were breaking into the house. They were lighting fires and candles. And I had gotten all the numbers of my neighbors, and I'd be like, just text me, let me know. And they'd be like, yeah, somebody's in the house with a candle. And I was like freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, it's going to burn down. And then the probate attorney's like, oh, don't worry. If it burns down, you don't have to buy it.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
They had no clue. It was not a teardown. It wasn't about, I guess they were seeing the lot. They were seeing the lot. It does overlook the Los Angeles harbor. When you're on the second floor, you can see the water. You can see the marina until one of those people builds in front of me, like you say, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. But there were people that were definitely investors that were looking to go in and obviously tear it down. I mean, I'm surrounded by multifamily dwellings everywhere because that was a real trend back in like the 70s and 80s. People were just tearing down all these cute old houses in the neighborhood. So there's only maybe 4 or 5 of us little older houses on the street, kind of separated around, and all around us are just these huge multifamily dwellings, not very attractive. They're just not. And you're right. I mean, a lot just sold right near me that's going to have, I think it's 2 or 3 lots together. It's going to have 11 apartments or units built on it. So
right. Wow.
That's what's going on. But that's not what I saw.
Right. So let's take a few minutes to talk about probate, because we were going to come to that. Let's spend, 3 or 4 minutes talking about probate. So what is probate and how is it different?
So basically a probate sale, it occurs when, and in this day and age, you should not let this happen. You don't leave any kind of will, or you don't put any of your property into a trust. That's the best thing you could do, is go get a living trust. And so the man that lived there, he had like some kind of handwritten will, and there were things that were found, but he didn't actually put this property into any kind of trust that would say this is who it was going to. So he passed away unexpectedly, and the guy that thought he was getting the property, so, he was going to get the money from the sale of the property, turned out all of a sudden this like woman showed up that he owed child support to. It was a terrible mess. And so all of a sudden now the courts are like, okay, we can't do anything. And so this 15-day escrow, I'm sitting there going, what's going on? And it took 6 months for that, to clear up. But let me back up a little. So basically in this particular case, I had to go into court. There was a certain date, and I can't think of what they call a confirmation, I believe is what they call it. And there were several people that were supposed to come that wanted to bid on the house. And there happened to be an accident on one of the Los Angeles freeways, which terrible for those people, but it worked out in my favor because I think 3 people showed up, and I was the only one that they allowed to actually bid against the person that had the offer in, because you had to show proof of funds, that you had these funds.
So can I interrupt you for just a second? So do I understand correctly that it was sort of like an auction, but you had to do it in court and you had to show that you had the funds to pay it if you won the auction? Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, 100%.
So basically at this point, the city of Los Angeles owns the house?
No, I think what they do is they try to find heirs.
Mm-hmm, right.
Anybody in a family, anybody that's left, it's kind of, I guess, sort of, that's the whole probate thing. It kind of goes into this little cocoon of the city or something, and they kind of hold it. They hire these probate attorneys. And the thing in California, at least Southern California, as far as I remember, I don't know if it's changed, is there's no cap on how much a probate attorney can charge for their services here. Other states there is, but them, spending all this money of the estate because they're getting paid through this estate. By the time it was to me to close this deal, there was very little money left over after the sale of this. And that's where the whole fight began, because this ex-wife who had 2 children, who said she never got a dime of child support, came forward. And then she's looking at all the prices of the houses in Los Angeles. She's thinking that I'm in cahoots with the probate attorneys and that we're trying to, pull a fast one, and I'm getting this very cheap, and I'm paying, far more than I wanted to for the house. But I want to save it, because I don't know what the other person that was bidding, I don't know what her plans were for the home. But it was just...
That's a lot.
It was, and then the day I had to go into court, my real estate agent was supposed to come and just be my moral support and help me. But one of the pointers that he gave me is, and if anybody ever wants to do this, before you just go blindly into the court and think you're going to stand there and bid, take at least 1 or 2 days, a couple weeks before, and go into a court and watch one of these live. I went and watched 2 of them live and watched how it worked. One was where the people were bidding against each other, and one was where no one showed up to bid, and that person was awarded the home for the offer they had put in. So you never know, and that was really educational for me. But I wasn't equipped to think I was going to be standing there by myself. I was like shaking, trying to have my poker face on, because basically the judge would be like, and Gina, do you agree to bid? And then she would say a number, and I would say, yes, Your Honor. And then she'd go to the next person. And inside I'm going, okay, you better stop now. Because I didn't know where she was going to stop, as far as the bidding. And I think it was going like in $5,000 increments at a time, but it was a lot going back and forth. And so I was a nervous wreck because my agent didn't show up until after I had won. And he's like, good job.
I am a huge sweater. Like I sweat. So I can just picture myself just like drenched with sweat and like having to bring a change of clothes after this is all over. I would be so stressed out.
It was super, super stressful. And then again, I was so happy thinking, okay, 15 days, the house is going to be mine. And I think it was like October 18th. And so I thought, okay, by the beginning of November, and then they kept putting me off and I didn't know what was going on. And it just kept dragging in month by month by month. And it got to a point where I had to threaten that I was going to walk away. I had no intention of walking away, but I had to threaten that because I knew that if they had to put this house back on the market again, that there was already no money left and that legally they have to put it back on for 6 months again. And so I felt bad for this woman, but finally what I said was, look, you guys are fighting with this woman. I found documents in the house that proved that she had been paid a certain amount of money. So I waited until the house closed before I would mail the attorneys that information. Basically, I said, can you guys just do me this favor? Just put this money, you have this money, the house is closed, put it in an account. You guys fight it out. I'm an innocent victim here. She's trying to get more money. That's between you guys, not me, And so they said the house was going to close. I drove down to the city clerk and stood in line to make sure I was holding that deed.
Yeah.
Very good.
Because I didn't trust it. It was such a rough experience.
So you've finished with the upstairs almost. You're getting there. You haven't started on the downstairs. When do you think this bed and breakfast will be available? Do you have a timeline or a target?
I don't yet. I mean, the upstairs took a lot longer than anticipated. I kind of blew through the budget. There was porch and balcony issues that had to be dealt with that kind of blew out my doubled budget. And so I think the downstairs will go a lot faster because it's just going to be basically restored. There's going to be new electrical and, of course, HVAC, things like that. But I think it's going to go a lot faster. I'm hoping not more than a couple more years.
That's wonderful.
It seems like you're very much on track. Stacy, I think, is asking this question because now we're planning a whole itinerary. We got to go visit Chris. But I don't know California very well. He's north. I'm saying we can cruise down the California coast, land in San Pedro is where you are. We'll stay in the Airbnb or the B&B.
And Daniel's talking about Christopher Wilson, who is restoring the ship in Stockton, California. He was on our previous episode.
Oh, yes.
It's just first name basis now. I'm like, Chris, everyone knows Chris. Sorry.
I will quickly tell you guys, so my birthday is the end of December, and I'm hoping that the end of this year, I want to try to do a road trip for my birthday and hopefully go I'm thinking maybe Pennsylvania and meet all of my IG friends I have so many of them that live. I know Pennsylvania is a big state, but I've got to look it up too. But there's so many people, or just kind of travel around like that too, and do a road trip and stop off to maybe meet you guys, and just see who I can see. So that's the plan if it goes well.
Let me tell you, there is nothing nicer than Western New York at the end of December. You'll love it.
I was going to say, you really have a glutton for punishment with this.
No, that would be fantastic. You are welcome at my house anytime. And before we say goodbye today, could you tell everyone where they can follow along with your projects and progress?
Absolutely. So my Instagram is Victorian by the Bay, as well as my Facebook, the same. I do have a website, victorianbythebay.com, which I have not updated lately. I've got to get in there and work on that. But that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for doing this, Gina. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, guys.
And congratulations on such beautiful work. It's really a pleasure to watch.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. Love following you guys, too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to our guest today, Gina Bellous.
And to continue the conversation, please join us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses. You can also follow Stacy at Blake Hill House or myself at Daniel Cantor.
And to learn more about everything we discussed in today's episode or to request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Until next time.
Thanks, everybody.